Hello and welcome to HUR at Home Inspiration. I'm Jackie Gales Webb, and what a week we've had. I hope you had a blessed Sunday. I hope you had inspiration from your church, from your congregational group, from the Bible itself. I pray that whatever you were able to have today is an inspiration for you and can get you through this week of constant news, constant changes. And I also pray that you stay safe and that you make sure that you continue to practice safety measures because we are still in the midst of a pandemic. So much news today. Pope Francis appointed the first African-American cardinal. Wilton Gregory, the Archbishop of Washington, and he is the Archbishop of Washington who led the Roman Catholic Church's response to the sexual abuse crisis in the early 2000s. And he was among the 13 new cardinals that were named today. In recent months, Archbishop Gregory urged Catholic leaders to improve race relations. And he is quoted as saying that we are at a pivotal juncture in our country's struggle for racial justice and national security. And both of my guests today understand that well. In their own way, they have helped people of faith and people all over the world become aware and become motivated. My second guest on HUR at Home Inspiration today is Brian Courtney Wilson, a gospel artist whose music inspires and also includes observations about racial injustice and mental health. My guest right now, I am so honored to welcome to HUR at Home Inspiration, Bishop William J. Barber II. Welcome, Bishop Barber. God bless you, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you're a very busy man, and your people have told me that you only have a short time to spend with us, so I won't take a whole lot of your time, but it is so, as I said, such an honor to have you with us at this very critical point in time. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about an organization that you have started. Start there because you are with the Repairers of the Breach. And for our viewers who might not know what that is, can you tell us what Repairers of the Breach is all about?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sister Webb, and to your viewing and listening audience. I'm honored to come on today. You know, we founded Repairers of the Breach a few years ago to engage in helping to lead and develop faith communities and ground level communities who wanted to engage in what we call moral fusion organizing. And moral fusion organizing says we're not going to look at issues as left and right, Democrat, Republican. We're going to take our deepest moral values from our faith, traditions, love, justice, mercy, truth, forgiveness, and our deepest moral values from our Constitution, establishment of justice, providing for the common good, providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare and equal protection under the law. And we're going to use those as grids, as guideposts for examining public policy. And we do something called moral analysis, moral articulation, and moral action. We said that we needed a recovery of this because our politics conversation has become so puny. You know, either you're on the left or you're on the right, or you're conservative or you're liberal, when actually those terms are too puny when you're really dealing with issues like systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation and the war economy and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And what we do is we look at how those five interlocking injustices cause breaches. In other words, a space between what we say we're going to be and who we really are. It causes breaches in people's lives. You know, people die from the lack of healthcare. They die from poverty. A breach is like a gaping hole. And the scriptures tell us in Isaiah 58 that the role of faith is supposed to be to repair the breaches. But the way you have to repair breaches is it says you have to care for the poor. You have to pay people what they deserve. You have to change injustice. You can't just worship, just have religious experiences that have no practical or political import. That's actually a scripture, Isaiah 58. And so that's the work we do all around the country. We have something called MPOLIS, the Moral Political Organizing Leadership Institute and Summit. And right now, Repairs of the Breach is heavily involved as the co-sponsor of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. And where we're organizing all around the country, we have 43 state coordinating committees. We've developed, we launched in 2018. Now we have thousands of people connected to us. We have we have major things. We've done the Souls of Poor Folk Auditing America, a moral justice budget. In 2019, we had a mass Poor People's Congress. First time it ever happened in the last 50 years. Poor and low wealth people, religious allies, and others coming together. And then this past summer, June 20th, we organized a mass Poor People's Assembly Moral Watch on Washington. 2.7 million people showed up online. We didn't go in the street because of COVID, but 2.7 million people showed up online to say it is time for America to deal with the reality of 140 million people, poor and low wealth, before COVID. Mm-hmm. Before COVID, we just had 8 more people fall into poverty since May.
That's right. Unemployment is up to the roof.
Go to the roof. That's right. And the issues and what we do in Moral Fusion, what Repairs of the Breach says, see, sometimes we want these breaches, we want to do it racism over here, and then poverty over here, and then ecological devastation over here, and the war economy over here. Repairs of the Breach says, no, these are interlocking injustices. And we need to have a group of people that are going to deal with all of them because they all connect. You can't find a person in this country hardly who, for instance, supports racist voter suppression that doesn't also block healthcare. Mm. And if a person normally, if they block healthcare politically, they block living wages. If they block living wages, they're pro-war and pro the war economy. If they're pro the war economy, they cut public education. I mean, it's glaring how those who want to create breaches, who want to create open, want to keep some haves and some have-nots, they are very similar in the things that they stand against. And so we can't keep operating in silos. We're going to deal with, take for instance, a question like police brutality. People say, well, police brutality is white cops killing unarmed people. And that's ugly, it's horrendous. But let me point out something to your audience. If you're going to deal with police brutality as a form of death, as a form of what we call necropolitics, the politics of death, then you also got to take a look at how many people are being killed. Black folk are dying from lack of living wages. You can actually measure that. There are measurements. The Columbia University says 700 people die a day from poverty before COVID. From poverty. Thousands of people die from the lack of health care. I think it's 4,800 for every 1 million people without health care. So what we would say is police brutality against Black folk, racist police brutality and killing, it should be a penetration point where we should deal with that, but also recognize there's a lot of policy death that doesn't get caught on camera. And our job in the movement, we have to open that up too, so that we can deal with the politics of death, necropolitics, and change it so that we can have life as opposed to death.
So what you're saying is it's all connected.
It's all connected.
Look at it in a siloed viewpoint. It's all connected. It's kind
of like your body, you hit your toe and see don't your mouth open up, right? and I mean, your brain goes to work the moment somebody hits your toe. It's not like it said, okay, toe, you are by yourself. And you have to think about it. And we have to be real careful. We often label people, even in our past, as Black leaders. I think sometimes we need to say they're leaders who happen to be Black because they weren't limited to us. Frederick Douglass also stood against the persecution of the Chinese people. He also worked with white women for women's suffrage, even though he knew Black women wouldn't be allowed at first. Sojourner Truth was also working with white women. The early abolition movement, people say, well, we've never seen this kind of diversity. Well, that means you don't read history. The abolition movement was Quakers and white evangelicals working with black folk like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. The early civil rights movement was diverse. Rosa Parks was sent to Highlander by 2 white women in Montgomery. Dr. King had a white clergyman who got beat up and his house was all bombed because he stood in Selma before John Lewis even came there. The Dallas Voter League had 9 people called the Courageous 8, but they also worked with the Catholic Saints of Edmund Pettus and a Jewish synagogue there. The point I'm making is we have to realize fusion politics that sought to repair the breach has always been a part of major social reconstruction.
And this fusion that you talk about, it makes me think about the question of, we're at a point where we seem more divided than ever before in this country racially. There's going to be an election. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, but who no matter who wins, no matter who loses, there's going to be some angry people.
Yeah.
How do we, after the election, get to a point, or what can we do to be more unified in our, work to make this country a better country?
Well, let me mess with the premise a little bit, and but hear me out. I don't think we are as divided as we were during slavery, and we made it through that.
Yeah. You're right.
I don't think we're divided as we were when the redemption movement tried to turn back the Reconstruction movement in the 1800s. I don't think we were as divided as when Woodrow Wilson, 100 years before Trump, played Birth of the Nation that celebrated the Klan in the Oval Office and told the media that, and then used that as a basis for his public policy, who also lied about a pandemic, tried to call it the Spanish flu when it was the swine flu, and allowed 650,000 people to be killed, even our troops. He himself almost died. I don't know if we are as divided as when George Wallace stood up and said segregation yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Now, here's the danger, though. We should have learned from that, because we have the potential to become more divided than ever if we don't stand up and stop this. Now, what part of stopping it has to be knowing that we can't overestimate our adversary or underestimate them. You see, one of the things we have to do in a good school like Howard, where so much history, that great history department at Howard, great law school at Howard. If you in a class at Howard University history, they would teach that in 1960, what we see today was planned, right? What I mean by that, in 1968, right at the end of the civil rights movement, Dr. King had been killed, Bobby, Jack Kennedy, Mega Malcolm, so many others. Pat Buchanan and Kevin Phillips went into Nixon's office and said, we know how we can win for the next 50 years. And Kevin Phillips and Pat Buchanan came up with a theory called positive polarization. And they said, if you can find out who is upset at the gains of the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and the women's movement, and then allow us to turn them against each other, we can divide the country for political expediency. This was actually written in a memo to Nixon. And they said, if we do this, we can control from Washington, Maryland, all the way over to the other side of Texas, called the South and the Sun Belt. We can make the Republican Party the party of white folk, quote unquote, the Democratic Party the party of black people, and we can split the country in half, and we will have the bigger half. And if we do this, we can control all of those states, because what we'll do is we'll use money and power and code words to pit black and white people against each other, particularly poor and low wealth, who ought to be allies. And if we do this, we will make sure that nobody in the South, no state ever votes for a Kennedy or a Johnson again. We'll lock up the South. And we can guarantee that the Senate is controlled by the states with the least population. They planned this. And it's written. It's not like it's not written. I'm like, what people you need to read? There's a book called The Illusion by a guy by the name of Shell, and he documents it. He said they wanted to create the illusion by controlling basically 17 states in the country. Because by controlling 17 states in the country, they could control 2017 is what, fourth? They could control over 34 Senate races before in just those states. They could control all those governorships. They could control the majority of the United States House of Representatives, and they could control the Electoral College. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to take too long, but for your students and others, Lee Atwater told on him in the 70s before he died. He had brain cancer. He was doing an interview, just like I'm doing with you. And he just, for some reason, just told it. He said, listen, this is how this thing worked. We found out in 1954, if you wanted to get elected, all you had to do was out-nigger the other opponent. He said this. You just said nigger, 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 and you could get elected all over the South. But by 1968, you couldn't say that because, you know, racism had been outlawed, the Civil Rights Act 64, the Voting Rights Act 65, all the great work of Thurgood Marshall and others. And he said, so we had to find a way to talk about race without sounding racist. So we came up with these code words, forced busing, states' rights. He said, then we needed something even more abstract. So we started talking about tax cuts. But the way we talked about tax cut, it became a code for cutting the taxes to keep those folk over there, i.e. black and brown folk, from getting things that's hurting you. And he said, and we sold that to people, and it worked. So what we see now, as Neil Painter at Princeton says, is an iconography of a too often repeated reality in America, this division. And that Donald Trump, and here's the lick, see, George Bush used the tactic, Ronald Reagan used the tactic, Nixon used it twice, both Bushes used it. The tactic was planned. Trump, however, played to an audience that had already been created, but they were messing around in the political laboratory, and they messed around and created a Frankenstein. Now, here's the problem with Frankenstein. Once you create it, politically or otherwise, he goes crazy. In all the horror movies about Frankenstein, once he's created, somebody keeps tinkering and tinkering and tinkering and tinkering and tinkering, and they finally get that right bolt in, and then he comes alive. And what does he do? He tears up the whole place. And that's what we're seeing now. It's not so much that we're more divided, it's that the tactics of division that we should have put down a long time ago. People are amazed now. Mike Epps is less than 1 point, black man running for the Senate in Mississippi. Jamie Harrison about to win in South Carolina. And I hear these commentators, oh my goodness, this is something new. No, the demographics have been there, but Democrats believe the illusions and wouldn't even fight in the South. COVID has made us have to fight everywhere. So I think we are bombarded by divisions. We have a neo-fascist in the White House. We've got a lot of issues going on. But I actually believe, and I tell you what, I don't even want to think about it if I'm wrong. I actually believe that there's still more people out there that don't want this, because 100 million people sat home the last time. Trump only won by 80,000 votes in 3 states. In those 3 states, 2.6 million poor and low-wealth people could have voted, didn't vote. In Wisconsin, he won by 30,000 votes, 250,000 votes were suppressed. In Michigan, he won by 10,000 votes, 100,000 black folk in Detroit that could have voted, didn't vote. So
you think they'll vote this time?
They better.
That's right.
I mean, at some point you kind of have to we got to stop giving Trump so much credit. Trump stole an election by 80,000 votes and electoral college, but 64 million poor and low wealth people were eligible to vote. Only 29 million voted. 34 million didn't vote. So now at some point, I can't keep blaming him and the 60 million people that voted for him. I want to talk to the 100 million people that didn't vote. I want to talk to the 34 million, and I don't want to beat up on you. I just want to say, see, you see what happens when you stay home? Now let's come on now. He's not all that bad. He's not that tough. You know, let me give you some quick numbers. Do you realize in Texas, Trump only won by 800,000 votes. 2,960,000 poor and low income voters didn't even vote that are already eligible. In North Carolina, he won by 170,000 votes. 920,000 poor and low wealth people didn't vote. 450,000 of them were black.
Wow.
In South Carolina, he did in South Carolina, which we call a red state. These states aren't red, they are unorganized. In South Carolina, he only won by 300,000 votes. 580,000 low wealth voters who could have voted didn't vote. And 35% of the black electorate didn't turn out, and 39% of the white electorate didn't turn out last time. So we cannot overestimate him or those running with him. What we need is a massive turnout of the vote, and we're gonna always have a certain level of division. But whether or not we're more divided or we're more apathetic, and I tend to think we're more apathetic, but we woke now.
Now, Bishop Barber, I see Brian Courtney Wilson backstage shaking his head. I think he has something he wants to say to you. So, producer Jeff, if we could bring Brian Courtney Wilson into the conversation.
Oh no, hey Brian.
Hey there, Pastor Barber. How are you?
Man, I'm hanging in here.
I'm shouting, man, just listening to you backstage. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for your work and how you've led us and how you've helped to wake us up. What does fighting look like to you when you say you need to keep fighting?
Yeah, fighting. And let me just, first of all, thank you for all your work and your artistry and your commitment. You know, in this right now where we are, let me give it to you theologically. You cannot bring Goliath down unless you go on the battlefield. You don't even need to go on the battlefield with what Goliath has, but you got to go on it with something. And you got to go on with what God has given you. As God said to Moses, what's in your hand? As he said to David, just pick up 5 rocks. Now, because probably Goliath got 4 cousins you might have to deal with. But if you just throw the 1 rock. So what I'm saying is right now, we need a psychic and a psychological break from this foolishness. And listen, there's not but one way. Before we can talk about what we're going to do next year and how we're going to push people to do this and that, we have one task right now. That is to vote. It's paid for in blood, dipped in sacrifice. The Hebrews tell us that, the Jewish people tell us in Hebrew, the word for vote and voice is the same word, call. Your vote is your voice, your voice is your vote. Your voice is your vote is your voice. God gives us as human beings the right to choose, which is the right to vote. Anybody trying to suppress your vote is committing an act of blasphemy against God and blasphemy against your humanity. The only way you can beat voter suppression is by voter aggression and voter participation. So right now, singularly, you're mad about the public policies, you got to change who's making them. And there's only one way you can change them out. We don't believe in military coup d'etats. You can't go throw people out. You can cuss all you want to, but that doesn't get people out of office. What we are doing in the Poor People's Campaign, we are telling the folk we must do more. That's how we fight. Mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating people for the movement who vote. We're saying to folk, listen, that in 15 states right now, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, if poor and low wealth people, and by the way, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people, 66 million are white, 26 million are black, but the 26 million black represents 61% of our community. But in those states, if poor and low wealth people just vote between 1 and 19% higher than last time, not even 25% higher, not even 30% higher. In Michigan, it's only 1% higher. North Carolina is 19. In Florida, is 5% higher. That's all we need. It's just 5% of vote that poor low that didn't vote. Fighting means you do that. You throw that punch, right? You do that. And because we don't know in America what a 75% voter turnout would look like and what it would do. Because it hasn't been. We've had 32, 34% of folk just stay home. So the first thing that has to happen right now is we have to vote for our lives. You got to look at these candidates not based on perfection. Who's telling you they're going to fight for you to have a living wage? Because if we had a $15 increase in living wage tomorrow, 49 million people would rise out of poverty the next day. $368 billion would be pumped into the economy. Who's fighting to say they're going to at least keep your health care and try to give you some more in the time of pandemic? Who's talking about dealing with voting suppression and passing a voting rights bill again? Who's talking about dealing with the air and the land and the water? Because we better deal with it down here, because as far as I know, you can't live on Mars or the moon or Saturn or Venus. They haven't figured that out yet. So this is all we have. I mean, this is a very practical vote, right? And then what you do is you vote for the person that's there, and then you say, we're going to stay engaged after the election. But right now, we have to vote for our lives. We have to vote for our lives. And how dare us? How dare us do less with more? Harriet Tubman had epilepsy. That's all she had. All she had was epilepsy. She had moss on the north side of a tree, and she had a North Star in the sky. Now, Harriet was not nonviolent like Dr. King. She wasn't. She had a pistol for the slave master and for the slave that was going to be free, because she would tell the slave, now you're going to be free. If you go with me, one way or the other, you're going to be free. You're not going back. That's the deal. You're going to be free. You're either going to go with me and be free, or I'm going to shoot you and you're going to be free in heaven, but you're not going back and tell all the rest of us. But my point is, that's all she had. And she had some white allies, Quakers and white evangelicals of that day, 700 people out of slavery. Now, we cannot let Harriet do more with less. And we have more.
I was listening to Dr. Freddie Haynes today, broadcast that he did for Rankin Chapel here at Howard University, and thank you for participating in Rankin Chapel. And he was talking about how your vote, he was quoting a rapper, your vote is your mic, and don't let anybody mute your mic. That is your voice. And that was so powerful.
And don't believe these folks, it don't make no difference. Let me tell you something. If it didn't make any difference, why people spending all this money to take it? I come from North Carolina. I'm going to tell you this quick story, and I got to run to another thing. I'll be at Rankin Chapel this coming Sunday. We're doing an national call to action sermon. I'm still working on it, but I want folk to join in because we're putting it everywhere. It's a national call from Howard University. But I come from North Carolina. In 2013, June 25th, 2013, the Supreme Court gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a seething dissent. And she said to take away the Voting Rights Act is like taking your umbrella off in the middle of a rainstorm and then saying you're not going to get wet. And what they cut was the pre-clearance portion. Because up until that time, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, all these states that had a history of voter suppression. And by the way, in order not to be covered by pre-clearance, all they had to do after 1965 is not suppress the vote for 10 years. And they could gotten removed. None of them could resist it for 10 years. So the law said the Justice Department had to see their laws first, and the Justice Department could say no or yes. But that got gutted, June 25th, 2013. On that day, Sister Webb, a Republican senator said to the paper, now that the headache has been removed, we can do what we want to do. I'm telling you what he said in the paper. We then filed suit in 47 minutes. I was president of NAACP. We had the Mall Monday movement. We had the Women's League. We filed suit, black folk, white folk, Latinos, and we went to court. And then we went in the street. 1,200 plus people got arrested over the period of about 3 to 4 years. 1,200. I think they got me 3 or 4 times. White, black, because they said this is just wrong. Because these same folk that voted this monster voter suppression bill, they also cut health care. They also cut public education. They blocked living wages. Same people. In fact, you'd like this, The first bill that they passed in the Senate, the computer kicked it out, and the computer named it Senate Bill 666. So they said, this is the truth. So they didn't use that bill. They passed another bill in the House, and it came out Senate Bill 589. So that's the bill that they actually ended up passing, House Bill 589, because they weren't going to run with Senate Bill 666. But it was the same bill, basically, just passed in two different bodies, right? So they spent $6 million of our tax money trying to suppress the vote. They wanted to end early voting. They wanted to end same-day registration. They wanted to put in place a photo ID that 50% of white women didn't even have. We fought them. We fought them, and we beat them. There's $6 million against our pro bono lawyers and our margin. We beat them in the court to the point that even the current Supreme Court had to say what they did was racism with surgical precision. And we beat them in gerrymandering. So this is the first year in North Carolina. That's why you're seeing all these lines in North Carolina, that we had the return to, and by the way, the laws they tried to take off the books, we had won those laws in 27. That's how Obama won in 28. Then they wanted to retrogress. They actually went into court and argued that they could take laws off the books that people had already used in 2 election cycles. And we caught them. But my point is, they spent $6 million of our own tax money to fight us. And when I'm in North Carolina, I say to folk, you better get out here and vote. Because if they wouldn't have spent, first of all, they stole your own money to fight against you. But more importantly, these people, because the power they got from a rigged election allowed them to block health care for 500,000 people before COVID. You hear what I'm saying? This is real, y'all. This is as real as it gets. And it's about public policy. It's not just about personality. And so fighting begins with voting, doesn't end with it. Voting is one of the tools. And it's one way we amplify our voice. But in a battle for justice, you don't take any of your tools off the table. And you don't take any of your ways of amplifying your voice off the table. You use everything. And if I was in church, I'd say, because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty unto the pulling down of strongholds. And whatever weapons God gives us nonviolently, you use those to the fullest for the cause of justice and mercy.
Well, one last question before you have to go. What is the prophetic pledge that faith leaders across the country have taken that you have had them to take?
Yeah, what we did in the Poor People's Campaign, as I said, we have 43 coordinating committees. We also have 200 partner organizations now. Every state coordinating committee is connecting 30,000 people to this movement, which is about 1.4 million people. We're building from the bottom up, led by poor people, religious allies. And in this election cycle, we said, a pastor or imam or rabbi cannot endorse a candidate as the pastor of that church. In other words, they can't say the church endorses somebody. But what they can do, they can endorse voting. And what they can do is they talk about issues. So we have two things going on. One is a call for 1,000 houses of worship and their leaders to make a pledge that they will get 1,000 people to the polls. In other words, a minimum. That's the members in their congregation and the members immediately around their congregation. That's 1 million people, right? And remember these data I've been telling you, some places you don't need but 100,000 to overcome last time's margin of victory. So that's 1 million people. The second is to get 10,000 people of faith to get 10 people. 10,000 people of faith to get 100 people. 10,000 to get 100. And to utilize all this social media, because you can reach 100 people almost in a little time with social media. I mean, I'm just a little old country boy, and I think I got 300, 400,000 followers. So, you can utilize it. Young folk know how to do it, and other people know how to do it. I met a grandmama the other day. She's 75 years old, and I was on a call, and she said, I done called 40,000 people. I said, what? And she said, yeah, I sit home, I cook my sandwich and put it over there, get me some iced tea, and I got one of my babies to teach me how to use this pewter. I said, use what? She said, this pewter. She said, yes. I said, go ahead, Grandma, use the pewter. She said, they show me if I hit this button here, I can call somebody. If I hit this, I can text them. And she said, I just sit here all day and do that. And somebody give her lists, they give these lists, and she's just working off. And I said, why are you doing that? She said, I got to get my babies free. She said, we've all bound up. We got to get free. I can't understand why we walk around here scared of all this heathenism and scared of these people trying to take. We got to get free. She did 40,000 sitting in her house.
Wow.
So we've organized 5,000 people and trained them on how to do voter protection at the polls, but also how to do peer-to-peer, how to do calls. And they have now, I think Tuesday, they will complete 2 million. 2 million calls to 2 million poor and low income infrequent voters in 10 states who, if they are moved to vote, and many of them we get positive response, they can shift who sits in the Senate and who sits in the White House and who sits in the governor's mansion.
Now that's fighting. And Bishop Barber, you are so much more than a country boy. I mean, president and senior lecturer at Repairers of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a MacArthur genius. I'd love for somebody to call me a genius and give me money to just go.
When I was in jail, let me tell you how smart I was. I was in handcuffs on the bus with people working, fighting for 15 in the union in Chicago, and somebody had kept their cell phone somehow with them. And they said, you just got the McBride. I said, well, can they bring a post bail? I don't know what they said, but can they post bail? That's what I want to know. We'll deal with the genius part later, but I had handcuffs.
Well, I fell in love with you in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention when you gave that speech. That's when I learned about Bishop Barber, and I've been a fan ever since. And I want to thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah,
that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a mark. I almost didn't happen. That's another story. But yeah, is there a heart in the house tonight? And we got these forces that are either trying to strangle this democracy, which is why we have to breathe, or they're trying to stop the heart of this democracy. We're not dealing, some of the stuff we see, and we got to call it what it is. Like Jesus called out, he said, you wicked and hypocritical generation. We got some folk that, and it doesn't, I don't like saying this, but you have to say it. A few weeks ago, we had 100 clergy and we pronounced judgment on the United States Senate. God told us in our hearts to just go and say this place has become Ichabod, it's lost its glory, because anytime you get up in the morning and all you can think to do with your power is hurt people, that's sinful. That's borderline demonic.
That's right.
I mean, you think about it, you wake up in the morning, you got a bunch of power. Let me see how many people I can kill today and take their health care. Let me see how many people I can make suffer. Let me see how much money I can give to the corporations while essential workers are dying. That is what the Bible defines as wickedness and evil. And you can't play with it. It's reprobate. I'm going to my Pentecostal roots now. It's wrong. It's idolatrous. It's a violation of the ways of God. It's anti-love. And so love and justice requires that you call it out. You don't have to hate anybody, but you have to warn them. Say, no, you recognize. And if you can't warn them, you have to love them enough to send them home. See, as long as they are hurting the poor with power, they are in a bad position because God's going to judge them for that. He said, I'm going to judge a nation by how you treat the least of these. So if I see somebody in power that can't think of anything to do with their power but hurt people, it's my moral obligation to vote them out of office so they won't keep hurting themselves and hurting me neither. I got to help them. I got to stop, come out from among them is what the Bible said. You got to stop Goliath. You got to stop those that are just committed on. So if I see a politician, president, whoever it is, and they're doing things that are contrary to God's way of caring for the least of these, I got an obligation when voting time comes to say, you need time out. You need some time to go think about what you're doing because something's wrong with you. Something's absolutely wrong with you to get up every morning and all you can think about doing. Listen, I know you got to go, but let me say it to you like this so you know. Every senator and every congressperson has health care with a public option. You know why? Because all they got to do is get elected and we pay for their health care. That's a public option. That's every one of them, Republican, Democrat, it does not matter. And then they get the best health care, right? Every senator has to be elected only one term. They serve 6 years. They get a lifetime pension. You have to work 30 years. Most folk 20, 30 years. They have never voted to take down their money. They've always voted to increase their salary. And every one of them makes way above a living wage. So what's wrong with you? That you don't want your constituents, even your ones that voted for you, to have the same thing that you have. That's right. Some kind of moral sickness. And those of us that know better have to challenge it in love, in truth, and in justice.
And that's just what you're doing. And we thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, and we're praying for you because it's like rolling a big stone uphill, but with God's help, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
My brother, keep doing what you're doing and all the ways that God is using you to minister to so many people, and just keep on, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Keep on in every way. Thank you. I gotta run
tonight.
Yep.
That's right. God bless you. Take care.
Wow, wasn't that wonderful?
I mean, it's off top, he's amazing and brilliant. And then you're also kind of floored by how plainly he points out the inequities and the injustice. That if you're a Christian and you read the Bible, those wages are gonna have to be paid for. That those wicked acts are going to have to be accounted for and judged. And so in that respect, it's sobering and leaves you with no choice but to try to fight it. You know, you got to try to fight it. So yeah, I'm grateful that we have a Pastor Barber. Grateful that we have a Pastor Barber to agitate, to illuminate, to help us organize. First of all, our thoughts. So we'll know how to think about these things and see them clearly, you know?
But he's, you know, when he talked about all the people who didn't vote the last time, there unfortunately are so many now that will say, well, I'm not voting for anybody. And as he said, there's still that thing where people say it doesn't matter, but it does matter. It's so important. And so we are fortunate to have people like him that are fighting, and we're fortunate to have people like you who are fighting in your own way through your music and your talent. And you have a new project out. Still, it was Brian Courtney Wilson Day on my program today. I played Still, I played We're Fighting For, and I played Great Work.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful music. So talk about Still and what that song is all about and what that project is all about, because not only do you have the beautiful song Still, but you also do a rendition of Marvin Gaye's Inner City Blues, and there's so many other wonderful components to Still.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me, Miss Jackie. It means a great deal. And thank you for sharing the music with your listeners. I'm forever grateful for that. Still is about a lot of things. Well, I won't say a lot, but a few things. And one in particular is a call to focus. I keep thinking about what Pastor Barber was saying about how where we find ourselves today is because of what people did intentionally. They focused on, okay, this is where we are. This is where we would like to be. And they focused on doing the things to seed into the environment. And I think people that are called to manifest the kingdom in the earth have to do the same thing. We got to find a way to stay focused despite circumstances, despite obvious reasons for anxiety and for many despair, worry, doubt, confusion, to in the face of these mountains that we're looking at right now, many of which Pastor Barber laid out eloquently before. we have to stay focused on what God has called us to do in the earth. And I believe if we stay focused, we can move those mountains. If we stay focused unto the Lord on our assignment and let love lead us in that regard.
Focused and faithful and without fear. There's so much going on now, so many things that try and make us worry and try and make us fearful about going forward.
That's right.
But as you said, if we stay focused and faithful, we can always go forward in God.
And I think not afraid to look at the problems, to look at the issues. This is the other thing I loved about what Pastor Barber said was, in many ways, we have deluded ourselves into thinking that the giant is too big to be beaten. When he brings up the Jamie Harrison and how he's close to winning that election now, it's because people decided, okay, wait, we're going to fight and we can win this fight. And let's go beyond politics with that. I think people now are dealing with all types of issues, from finance to health to emotional, dealing with how we're going to keep our family together, what we're going to do with our kids, and how they're responding to what's going on. And these all can present as mountains that seem impossible to move. And sometimes, you know what we do? We, instead of tackling the mountain, we look away and we do things to bring some comfort and distract us from that, so we won't focus on it. And I'm saying, if you're still breathing, I believe that's because God is still voting on you. He's still deciding, hey man, you can still make a difference with your life. And that's why I'm giving you this grace, this breath that you did not earn, so you can use it to pay for what you want to see in the earth.
Wow, that's beautiful. Now, I was reading that you're doing some conversations there in Houston about the intersection of racial justice and mental health and grieving in the pandemic. It's on a local radio station, and is it also online where people can participate?
Yeah, we're on our Facebook Live page. It's 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's called Breathe Again. And actually, we've been talking about a lot of things. It's not just that, but the main point of our gathering is to, one, remember that this breath, that if you still have it, it's a gift from the Lord, and use it to move into the future with expectancy, expecting to be able to build for a brighter future, and help your brother and sister do the same thing. And so we've had numerous guests come on and talk about their faith, talk about their career and the origins of their career. Just this week, we had Pastor Michael Mcbride, who's one of the chief organizers for the Black Church PAC, which speaks to what William Barber is speaking to in terms of affirming the power of the Black vote from the Black church and our ability to organize in that regard and get things done. So that's what those Thursday nights are about for us. And then we've also been fortunate. So Still, in particular, Inner City Blues, got the ear of our mayoral office in Houston. And they wanted to do an initiative where they were addressing the mental health concerns we've been seeing in the city. And they saw a link between what I was doing musically and what they were trying to address, and graciously allowed us to share music on town halls that they've been doing there in the city. And so that was really the point of the music, to just kind of be honest actually with my own anxieties and things I've had to wrestle with to keep moving forward, remembering that we overcome by the word of our testimony. And so it's important to be honest. Well, honest and filtering, what is going to be useful for public consumption. And so prayerfully, you'll hear elements of that on this new project. Thankfully, the city of Houston has already heard some things that they found useful.
That's beautiful. That song, Inner City Blues, it's a shame that the lyrics are still timely. Make me want to holler the way they do my life. It's like he wrote it for 2020, actually.
I know, right? Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I didn't even intend to release it widely. We recorded the project as a tribute to Motown, who was celebrating 60 years. I believe it was 60 years. last year of recording. And when George Floyd was murdered in front of us, and we all saw that at the same time, thankfully, my team and I, with Motown Gospel, we got together and we said, well, how do we respond to this in the moment? And Inner City Blues is what we decided to say. It worked for me because I think we needed the lament that you hear in that particular song. We needed to feel and really take a hard look at the fact that, like you said, 50 years later, the lyrics of that song are still relevant. And now, as I listen to Pastor Barber, that's intentional. People decided that that's where we want to be. They focused on it and decided we want those words to still be relevant 50 years later. All the more reason to be real about the fact that that mountain is still present, and then intentional about moving it, about making choices to move it. And so that's why I wanted to put it on the record. I wanted it on a gospel record because we don't just holler. We are heard by our Lord and Savior. And we don't settle for the blues. We have this good news that we carry. And so that's why I wanted to put it on a gospel record, right in smack in the middle, around these other messages of hope and determination.
We've met a few times in person before. The first time we met, you came to WHUR with Fred Hammond and the United Tenors.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the second time you came to HUR, I think it was when Worth Fighting For was out, and you and Anthony Brown actually came on the same
I remember.
day.
I remember.
We had a wonderful time. And speaking of that song, Worth Fighting For, at the end of that beautiful song, your son comes in and sings. How is he doing? How's your family?
You know, he's doing great. In fact, well, I'll put it like this. To quote A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So he just started his freshman year at USC, where he's studying music at the Thornton School of Music.
Excellent.
But he hasn't been able to move in yet. So the best thing is that he made it in, but he hasn't been able to go yet. And so we kind of watching him really push through, you know, and it's been a blessing to me. It's like I get bonus time with my son and watched him matriculate and watched him struggle to get his lesson and make sure he's doing an excellent job. But he's doing well. And I just think about the irony, you know, their slogan is fight on at USC. And that's the song he was singing about, we're fighting for. And we had no idea at the time that we would end up going to that school. But those are the types of things that remind me that God has his hand. He's still present, still merciful enough to abide with us, and then mighty enough to move circumstances in ways that manifest his glory, so we see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living.
So this is his freshman year, right?
Yes.
So how was it for him and you that, you know, the prom and the graduation, all that was kind of messed up by COVID-19, right?
Yes. I mean, I was going to try to clean it up, but no, it wasn't good, you know. The kids had that virtual prom that was on television, and we did end up having a socially distanced graduation outside with this school. But what we've tried to do intentionally is focus on the big picture with him and focus on the fact that this is just a moment. This is just a season on the way to all that God has for him. And I'm convinced that pressing through this season with faithfulness and focus is going to make him stronger in that regard.
Well, he's blessed with some great parents.
Thank you for saying so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it comes through in the music that you select and that you sing, that you're faithful to God and you're dedicated to making the world a better place through what you do.
That's
And
kind of you to say. Thank you.
Oh, definitely. I mean, a perfect role model for a young man. And I want to thank you so much for your beautiful music and your ministry. And is there anything else you want to tell us about still, or anything coming up for Brian Courtney Wilson that we should know about?
Well, I just want to invite people to really listen to it. I think it has some messages on it that are timely and will really help you, especially if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, worry in this season. I think there's some things, messages that are communicated on the record that'll really help you. And not just you, but people you love. So, and that's always what it's about to me. I just want to share it with people that will be helped by it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I saw you backstage just raring to go and talk to Bishop Barber. So I hope you don't mind me bringing you on earlier than
I was going to say thank you. Actually, it was an honor to even share a few minutes with Bishop Barber. Like you said, he's a busy man, and I believe the work that he's doing is impacting all of us for good. So just being on the screen with him for a few seconds was an honor to me. Thank you.
So, Brian, could you give us a prayer to end our conversation? And first of all, I want to thank everybody who chatted in and is watching. I see Kenyon McAfee and Barbara Hunt and Vivian Rasco and Marcella Rich and Valerie C. Bryant Brown and many others. And I want to thank you all. So, Brian, if you could just give us a prayer to close our conversation.
I will. I have a very brief one that I've been praying a lot of late. Lord, I ask that you have mercy on us. And I ask that you extend blessing and favor and a peace that surpasses understanding to everyone under the sound of my voice. And may it overwhelm them in ways that make them cry in public and not even care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And please be safe. Take safety precautions. And please, if you haven't voted already, please do so. And God bless you.